Hello again, everyone. This is Miss Cañete for the third part of the discussion on the ethical moral aspect of nursing. The PRC, or the Professional Regulation Commission, on July 23, 2003, promulgated the Code of Good Governance. Since we are discussing the ethical moral aspect of nursing, it's imperative that we are aware of the Code of Good Governance, which states that the hallmark of all professionals is their willingness to accept a set of professional and ethical principles, which they will follow in the conduct of their daily lives. So, acceptance of these principles requires the maintenance of a standard of conduct higher than what is required by the law. So take note, standard of conduct that is higher than what is required by the law. These general principles include, number one, service to others, which requires professionals to have the commitment to a life of sacrifice and genuine unselfishness in carrying out their professional duties, even at the expense of personal gain. So it must be difficult, but this is a principle that is uh, required of all professionals, especially right now during the time of pandemic, in the face of shortage of healthcare workers and the temptation to go out of the country because of greener pastures. So service to others, especially here in the Philippines, must be very difficult. But we have to take note that one of the general principle of the Code of Good Governance promulgated by PRC in 2003 is service to others, which entails carrying out our professional duties even at the expense of our personal gain. The second principle is integrity and objectivity, which requires all professionals the performance of responsibilities with the highest sense of integrity and imbued with nationalism and spiritual values. Also, the professionals have to maintain objectivity and be free of conflicts of interest. Professional competence is another general principle in the Code of Good Governance, which is the obligation to keep up with new knowledge and techniques in the field of expertise, or in the field in our respective fields, in the respective fields of all professionals, and also upgrade our level of competence. So even though, like in your case, when you graduate and when you pass the board exam and you receive your license, as nurses, you are obliged to update yourselves to keep abreast with new trends and challenges, and upgrade your level of competence as you go along, with the practice of your profession. Another principle is solidarity and teamwork, which requires professionals to maintain and support one professional organization for all its members. So as nurses, we have professional organizations, like, for example, the Philippine Nurses Association, and other organizations. Another is social and civic responsibility, which requires all professionals to carry out professional duties with due consideration of the broader interest of the public, serve the public with professional concern consistent with their responsibilities to society, and consequently contribute to the attainment of the country's national goals, and objectives. Another principle in the Code of Good Governance for all professionals is global competitiveness. which requires all professionals to rise up to global standards and maintain levels of professional practices fully aligned with global best practices. And then another one is the equality of all professions, wherein we are all required to treat our colleagues with respect and to strive to be fair in our dealings with everyone, with every professionals. So in view of that Code of Good Governance promulgated by PRC in 2003, you must realize the importance of ethical code. And its importance is that it is a systematic guide for developing ethical behavior. It also answers normative questions of what beliefs and values should be morally acceptable. So basically, they become our reference points for developing our standards of conduct in the practice of our profession. Of course, we have discussed previously the different ethical approaches and ethical principles, which are also our reference points, which are our basis in our decisions. But the ethical codes that are promulgated are basically kumbaga they were sifted through all those from those ethical approaches and principles, and that guides now the practice of the profession. So a while ago we discussed about the code of good governance, which is applicable to all professionals. Okay, now let's take a look at the ethical codes for nurses. The Nursing Code of Ethics strongly emphasizes the fourfold responsibility of nurse: the universality of the nursing practice, the scope of their responsibilities to the people they serve, to their co-workers, to society and environment, and to their profession. But before we examine the Nursing Code of Ethics, let's take a look first on the brief history of how the Nursing Code of Ethics has evolved. In 1982, the Philippine Nurses Association Special Committee, under the chairmanship of Dean Emeritus Julita B. Sotejo, developed a code of ethics for Filipino nurses. And this was enforced up to 1989. In 1984, the Board of Nursing Professional Regulation Commission adopted the Code of Ethics of the International Council for Nurses through the Board Resolution number 633, adding the fifth-fold responsibility of the nurse, which is the promotion of spiritual environment. In 1989, the Code of Ethics, promulgated by the Philippine Nurses Association, was approved by the Professional Regulation Commission, and through Board Resolution number 1955 was recommended for use. And this was approved by the General Assembly of the Philippine Nurses Association during the Nurses Week Convention on October 25, 1990. Pursuant to Section 3 of Republic Act No. 877, known as the Philippine Nursing Law, and Section 6 of the Presidential Decree No. 223, the amended Code of Ethics for Nurses, recommended and endorsed by the Philippine Nurses Association, was adopted to govern the practice of nursing in the Philippines. The amended Code of Ethics was adopted under Republic Act 9173 and promulgated by the Board of Nursing under Resolution number 220, Series of 2004, last July 14, 2004. Now let's take a look at the contents of the Code of Ethics for Nurses. The Section 1 of the Code of Ethics articulates that health is a fundamental right of every individual, and that the Filipino registered nurse, believing in the worth and dignity of each human being, recognizes the primary responsibility to preserve health at all costs. Also, Section 2 articulates that nurses must have comprehensive knowledge of man's cultural, social, spiritual, physiological, psychological, and ecological being to effectively facilitate care. The Section 3 of the Code of Ethics also states that the ethical conduct is practiced to attain respect and confidence of everyone. Okay? Now, let's take a look at how the Code of Ethics provides instructions, or guidance to nurses and how they conduct themselves, with people. So, the Article 2 further elaborates, the provisions for how nurses will conduct themselves towards people. So, this is under the registered nurses and people. Section 4 specifies that nurses should respect values, customs, and spiritual beliefs shall be respected. Also, individual freedom to make decisions shall be respected, and personal information of patients shall be held in strict confidence. Section 5 of the same code articulates that the welfare and safety of patients take precedence over the need to respect individuality, spiritual beliefs, culture, and even the right of individuals. So, in the event that we face a conflict between these, we should remember that the welfare and safety of patients is given priority. Now, Article 3, on registered nurses and practice, nurses are are reminded that human life is inviolable under Section 6. So, human life is not to be violated. That's why abortion is not accepted right now here in the Philippines. Abortion is a crime, so because in our Code of Ethics, Section 6 asserts that human life is inviolable. Also, quality and excellent care is the goals of nursing. Also, accurate documentation is needed for establishing accountability. Section 7 of the Code of Ethics requires that nurses should know the Philippine Nursing Act of 2002 and its implementing regulation. Also, under Section 8, registered nurses advocate for the patient. They shall take steps to safeguard patients' rights and privileges. So this would entail respecting the patient's Bill of Rights and providing full transparency of information to patients or families. Also, nurses must uphold the patient's rights when conflict arises, when it comes to conflicts in terms of management of their care. Okay, so because we are, after all, patients advocate. Section 9 states that nurses are aware, or should be aware of their actions, must have professional, ethical, moral, and legal dimension. So nurses must be aware that their actions have these dimensions, and they should strive to perform their work in the best interest of all concerned. I hope that you will remember, no, the contents of our code of ethics. Now, section 10 under article 3 articulates that nurses must perform duties in conformity with laws and rules. Also, we should not allow ourselves to be used in advertisement. No, kaya do not forget about this. We are not allowed to endorse any products. Also, we are to refuse bribes or favors. We have to refuse commissions for referrals of patients. And we should avoid any abuse of our profession. Now, in terms of the nurse and her co-workers under Article 4, particularly Section 11, it must be noted that the registered nurse is in solidarity with other members of the healthcare team in working for the patient's best interest. So the RN maintains a collegial and collaborative working relationship with colleagues and other healthcare providers. And you are always reminded, even right now as a student, that in the future you will always be collaborating with a team. So I hope that your training with your group mates will already is already preparing you for the team collaboration ahead. Okay. Under Section 12, in terms of registered nurses and co-workers, nurses must maintain their professional role. Also, they must conform to ethical legal standards, needs to contribute to the professional growth, needs to participate actively in professional organizations, should not act against other professions, must maintain dignity of the nursing profession, and needs to respect the rights of their co-workers. In terms of the registered nurse and the society and the environment as a whole, under Article 5, Section 13 specifies that the nurse must commit to preserve human life and respect the rights and promote healthy environment. Also, the nurse must be able to establish linkages with public in promoting local, national, and international efforts to meet health and social needs of the people and link with others to promote health. Under Section 17 of the Article 5 on nurses with society and the environment, the nurse must be a member of an accredited professional organization and must adhere to the nursing standards. Also, must grow the profession, contribute in improving socio-economic and work conditions of nurses, and demand for the implementation of labor and work standards. So how do we demand? We lobby. So we lobby or we conduct research studies that would eventually help in health policies. Aside from the first four elements that we have mentioned, the registered nurse and people, registered nurses in practice, registered nurses and co-workers, registered nurses and nurses, society and environment, in the new Code of Ethics for registered nurses, the registered nurses and the profession is added. We have also mentioned a while ago that the PRC, or the Professional Regulations Commission, adopted the International Council of Nurses Code of Ethics. So the ICN Code of Ethics articulates that that inherent in nursing is respect for human rights, including the right to life, to dignity, and to be treated with respect. Also, nursing care is unrestricted by consideration of age, color, creed, culture, disability or illness, gender, nationality, politics, race, or social status. So nurses render health services um, no, regardless of these. Uh, so there are no restrictions. And also, nurses render health services to the individual, the family, and coordinate their services with those of the related groups. An international code of ethics for nurses was first adopted by the International Council of Nurses in 1953, and it has been revised and reaffirmed at various times since then, most recently with this review and revision completed in 2000. So let's take a look at the content of the International Council of Nurses Code of Ethics, since the PRC also before adopted it. No? Um, According to the ICN Code of Ethics, nurses have four fundamental responsibilities: to promote health, to prevent illness, to restore health, and to alleviate suffering. Also, the need for nursing is universal. On nurses and people, according to the ICN Code of Ethics, the nurse's primary professional responsibility is to people, uh, these people who are requiring nursing care. And in providing care, the nurse promotes an environment in which the human rights, values, customs, and spiritual beliefs of the individual, family, and community are respected. In terms of nurses and practice, the nurse carries personal responsibility and accountability for nursing practice and for maintaining competence by continual learning. Also, the nurse maintains a standard of personal health such that the ability to provide care is not compromised. So nurses must be healthy, no, and so that it will not affect also, no, in their ability to provide care to patients. Also, the nurse uses judgment regarding individual competence when accepting and delegating responsibility. Also, if the nurse thinks no that the the task that is being delegated to her or him is impossible, no, or is beyond his or her competency or skills, beyond her technical training, then he can refuse it, because we shouldn't be performing tasks that we have no competence or skills in doing it. So, yeah. So we need to use our judgment regarding our own individual competence. On nurses and the profession, the nurse assumes the major role in determining and implementing acceptable standards of clinical nursing practice, management, research, and education. The nurse is active in developing a core of research-based professional knowledge. No, so that's why we need to participate, or we need to continue to conduct research studies, no, that would uh, generate new knowledge and contribute to uh, to the existing nursing knowledge. The nurse, acting through the professional organization, participates in creating and maintaining equitable social and economic working conditions in nursing. So that's why each professional organization usually are the ones lobbying, for the improvement of nursing practice in that particular uh, field. Okay. On nurses and co-workers, the nurse sustains a cooperative relationship with co-workers in nursing and in other fields. Also, the nurse takes appropriate action to safeguard individuals when their care is endangered by a coworker or any other person. No, so when we say appropriate action, no, the nurse must be able to carefully deliberate, no, how to go about with the action. Yes, of course, we are patients advocate, but at the same time, we are also uh, we are also maintaining a professional relationship with our colleagues. So on we need to we need to be able to come up with strategies, no, to on how to go about whenever there is a conflict between the management of care with the patient, if the patient is endangered by our coworker. So there is a professional way of dealing with it. In essence, the International Council for Nurses Code of Ethics is a guide, no, for action based on social values and needs. It will have meaning only as a living document if applied to the reality of our profession, not to the realities of nursing and healthcare in a very dynamic society. So to achieve its purpose, the code must be understood. It must be internalized and used by nurses in all aspects of their work. It also must be available to students and nurses throughout their study and work lives. So to summarize, in applying the elements of the International Council of Nurses Code of Ethics, uh, the nurses must be able to apply these four elements. And these are the nurses and people, nurses and practice, nurses and co-workers, and nurses and the profession. Because these four elements basically give a framework, no, for the standards of conduct. So they are reference points that nurses may use, no, in the practice of their profession. Okay. Now, of course, you have learned more, no? When you and maybe you can still recall, no, that we have a lot of topics in bioethics in the early years, no, of your stay in the Institute of Nursing. So, whenever you will be confronted, no, with specific issues, challenges, or ethical dilemma, uh, I hope that you will be able to find, no, to identify or determine the ethical approach that you're going to use. You'll be able to develop that ethical sensitivity. You will be able to reflect, no? Uh, you will be able to reflect on the situation so that you can deliberate on the elements of the ethical issue. And then so that you will become ethically aware of what really is the issue all about. No? Kasi confusion might hinder you from being ethical. So you need to achieve clarity, no, of the ethical issue. So you need to have that ethical awareness and consciousness and clarity so that you can deliberate well during the ethical decision making process. And so that you will be trained in identifying appropriate moral or ethical judgment so that you can translate this into your behaviors and practice. But of course, before you can do that, you will need ethical courage. So fortitude. Yan. You need moral courage to translate your ethical judgment into actions. Because sometimes the ethical dilemma becomes more intense when um, when they know what is right, but when they are restrained or constrained to do it, all the more that they are experiencing ethical distress or moral distress. So I hope in the practice of your profession in the future, you will develop that skill, no, that ethical competence, so that you will be able to come up no, with ethical decisions that will eventually no, help your patients, that will eventually help us achieve better patient health outcomes. Okay? So that would be all, everyone. Thank you for listening. No, and yeah, I hope to see you around when we start to have our face-to-face classes. I hope it will be soon. Okay? Stay safe and well.